everybody, and IT Nation and ConnectWise users and vendors that watch us and whoever's watching us today. My name is Sean Lardo. I am the evangelist. They call me evangelist here at ConnectWise. You're now going to be tuned into, and thank you for attending and tuning into in our Accelerating Growth series on data organization today. As we put out from me and Jake Varghese last month, that we were going to put together a series and host a series of episodes around everything involving with the organization, everything around accelerating your growth. So this is the very first episode with one of our actual partners and one of our coworkers at ConnectWise. Very excited about this. We're going to get into it now, actually. But before we do, real quick, also wanted everybody to keep in mind that we are just right around the corner from IT Nation Connect. So everything you see on here, we will be talking about there. So I do really suggest if you haven't registered, you should definitely register. We are offering online as well for free to watch the whole conference online. So with that being said, let's start talking about who we have on today. I already discussed myself. So again, Economy Evangelist here at ConnectWise. I have on with me Eric Hoffmaster. Look, there he is. He's a COO at Innovative Computing Systems. And Ashley Nicely, she's a manager at Partner Success Forum, BrightGauge/ConnectWise. And by the way, I'm going to put out there now that everywhere I ever go, BrightGauge always gets compliments. You know, there's not really many arguments over if it's really a useful tool or not. Literally, everybody seems to like it. So kudos to you guys, Ashley. Now, with that being said, good afternoon. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Really excited for today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And Eric, that's even really excited. Slow down. Don't be too excitable, man.
I'm talking it up.
But before we came on live, Eric and I were talking about, we're a little tired today. I just got back from ASCII Cup in DC, literally flew back home this morning. I'm not sure why Eric is tired, but we don't need to know all that right now.
I have a baby. That's all you need.
And also, Eric, I forgot to mention, even you were also the facilitator for the Texas user group, Locked and Loaded. Yeah. So thank you for being that. And keep in mind, for everybody watching, Eric is an actual partner, an actual user. So we are, as we go through this whole presentation today, it is literally around you and not us, correct? I'm saying that for just making sure we say it publicly so everybody knows that, and you're saying it. Perfect. So when we started putting this together, the series, we talked about why the series was so important. And one thing we definitely know, and this is a great quote, this is a great stat, right? Is that not having access to high quality data can affect productivity by as much as 20%. You know, and I've seen it even be worse than that. So, you know, Eric, I'll start with you though. While this has happened, you know, and having this effective data, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I love this quote because it's true, but a lot of people miss the high quality portion of the quote because just having data doesn't allow you to affect productivity. It's about having the high quality data. You know, we've heard garbage in, garbage out. You know, I mean, how do you organize the data? How do you know what the data is? What is good data? And then leverage it to start pulling the levers, tweaking the systems, building processes to really achieve that productivity gain. So I'm looking forward to talking about that.
I couldn't agree more. I like the fact that you stressed the high quality. We should probably put that in quotation marks, right? Just so people really saw that. And garbage in, garbage out has been since the beginning of time. Me having a sales background, especially using CRMs, it was a struggle point if we didn't update the information and we have bad information. A simple example is calling the company, asking for somebody who hasn't worked there in 15 years. Always looks bad, right? Trying to email them, and for some reason it's not delivering, but it doesn't say non-deliverable, and it's because they don't work there and they're still waiting for a response in your pipeline. That's a problem. So now, Ashley, you get a chance to work with all of our partners on stuff like this. So I like your take on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things we find at BrightGauge, when a partner first gets BrightGauge, they're really excited. They have all of these goals. They want to start tracking all these metrics. And, you know, I'm excited for them as well. However, when we start diving into it, it looks like they don't really have any clear processes around how do I get high quality data, and how do I get my entire organization on board with getting high quality data. So a lot of times we start off with the goals, we have the end in mind, but we need to take a step back and talk about internal processes and how people can make their organization more data driven so that everyone understands the part that they have to play in getting good data. So that's one of the things that we work with a lot on the Bright Gauge side, and just how can we take a step back and make sure that you have high quality data that you can action on from there, and then of course build all of your visualization in Bright Gauge. As Eric mentioned, garbage in, garbage out. Sure, we can build the metrics, we can get them on a screen, but they're probably just gibberish unless you have some sort of solid process around your data and how to get good data. So yeah, definitely a challenge for a lot of our partners out there today.
So I appreciate that too, because and from your perspective, even Ashley, when I ever worked when I was making a migration from one CRM to another, we worked with specialists on the new platform, and they would talk to us about the KPIs or whatever we're trying to track and what the actual technology could do. So would we say that first thing is is identifying what these data points should consist of, and then also if the system you're working with can actually handle that? Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
Or and sometimes the data just doesn't even exist, right? Like time entry, that's something that we deal with a lot. Wanting to understand your utilization of your team members, or wanting to understand your billable rates. But then we dive into it, and it turns out that maybe 20% of the organization is actually entering time.
Mhm.
So, some of those struggles are just things that, you have to kind of take a step back and see that big picture um, to get to
Perfect.
where you want to go.
Absolutely. Okay, good. So, well, actually, so everything about the show actually supports all this, right? I mean, that's what we're about to get
Mhm.
into. So again, and by the way, I'm a huge fan of dashboards because I feel like I can't make spot on decisions or make adjustments or anything without being able to see everything aggregated, right? So that's actually what we're going to go into. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. And this is based off of you. Again, I'm stressing to everybody watching. This is not based off me and Ashley, but based off of you.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into this then. Um, and I'm not going to talk much more about this other than this is your stuff. We're talking about Operation Maturity Dashboard One. Can you walk us all through this?
Yeah, and I think before we go through the details of the dashboard, it's important to talk about the journey because when we started down our journey of looking at data and trying to be a business that makes decisions based on data, we go, okay, great, let me see what I have, and then we get Bright Gauge, we throw in a few gauges, and we're like, wow, there's just a wealth of information, and we don't know what it all means. And so when I talk about operational maturity, the beginning phases, it's about gathering whatever data exists. And 99% of the time, when you do that first stage, most of it's wrong. It doesn't mean anything because you don't have a lot of processes that make the data consistent. The data is not getting entered right. So when you're looking at these things, it's like, well, I don't even understand what that is. Great, I have 668 open tickets. Is that good? Is that bad? I have no context. Oh, but then I start looking into the data and go, wow, all these tickets are still open, but we finished the work, but they're still open. And oh, it's because I don't have a process that drives how to actually process these tickets. So it all goes back to process, and it's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog here, right? You're going
Mhm.
to look at the data and then backtrack into a process so the data gets good, so you can use the data. Right?
So in other words, you're retrofitting. In
Yeah.
other words, because you're so okay. So a question then. We have two different types of MSPs that are going to watch this. You have brand new people that don't have anything yet that are literally building this out now. And you have
Yeah.
the other people that are already in this business for years that will need to understand how to maybe reset or reevaluate or whatnot. So let's start with people that have never done it yet or are doing it now. Is there anything you suggest specifically, or are we looking at what you should be looking at for data right now for tech or whatnot?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So if you're starting out, you're gonna go to Google and say, what are my KPIs that I should look at? Show me the things I should be measuring in my business. They're gonna spit out a whole bunch of you should be looking at these numbers. Right. And so this one's focused on service specifically. It's not looking at sales or accounting or whatever. So it's looking at service. And these are some of the things that you would typically find. And hey, you should be looking at how many open tickets you have, or how many open P1s you have, or how many tickets you close in a day, and what's your deficit, and what's your SLA response times. Right? So that, I mean, that's going to be what they suggest. And so this dashboard is kind of created off of that. I'm just going to vomit a bunch of data out and look at it on a dashboard. Ooh, it's pretty, and I can see information. And so the operational maturity, this phase one, is just looking at a bunch of data, but there's no context. There's nothing to do about it. And so you then have to mature, right? And so if you're starting out, you're going to look at the data and you got to ask questions around the data so that you understand why the data looks a certain way.
Okay.
Like,
So
take an example.
So I heard persona
Yeah.
first. So based off persona, and then based off of, because you said sales, you said service delivery and whatnot, right? So
Okay.
persona, and then into the actual categories of what you're trying to look for. And you can just Google it.
Yeah.
To start with, just take the simple baseline.
You know, if you're the director of sales, what sales metrics are you say? Oh, here's, you need to know your pipeline and how many opportunities you have for each sales person, and all that, right? Hey, if I'm a service manager, persona, right? What should I be looking at? Oh, your tickets, your SLAs, your stats, your open closes, right? So your first step towards this journey is just get a whole bunch of the data. And there's nothing wrong with going to those Google searches and finding out the top things you should be looking at, because you got to start somewhere, and that's a pretty good start. But
Right.
what you're going to get is a dashboard that looks kind of like this. Like, I grabbed a whole bunch of data. What do I do with this stuff? I don't know. I don't even know if this data is accurate. So it's not enough to just get the data. You have to start asking questions about the data. And that's really where you take your first step towards maturity. Great, I've got 668 open tickets. I'm going to click on that thing. I'm going to see what 668 is. I've got tickets that are 300 days open. Why? Okay, follow that. Go down the rabbit hole. Why do I have that? Oh, it's because we don't have a process that's supposed to close tickets when the last time entry is done, or we didn't ever follow up with a client, and so we don't know if it's actually closed. Oh, well, then we should probably do something. We should probably put a process in place so that we do it consistently. Oh, and then those open tickets, the 300-day open tickets, are gone. And the only open tickets are the actual relevant tickets because you built a process behind it. Right. So what we'll go to the next step is, once I start looking at the data and I start asking the questions and I build the processes around getting the data consistent, then you actually add a little bit of context. So if we go to the next phase of maturity, the next dashboard here, what could this evolve to look like? I've started to ask the questions. I've started to understand why things are. I've started to build processes so that things are consistent. So now I can start looking at things instead of just open tickets. I can start to ask the question, well, how many open tickets versus closed tickets do I have? Is there a deficit? Am I staying on top of tickets? And then you can start answering questions like, do I have enough engineers to close enough tickets in a day? Am I starting with a deficit, or am I on track? And then start looking at your service level agreements. Your data is consistent. The tickets are being handled. It always goes from new to in progress to whatever. So you have a process that builds that, and it's consistent. So now your data is consistent. You go, okay, but my SLAs are still off. But I know that, okay, I'm meeting 60% or 90%. And then I can see the types of tickets I have, because I know that when a ticket comes in, it needs to be categorized. So I built a system to say it's always going to be either desktop or server or network or whatever categorization system you have. And then you have a slightly better dashboard that gives a little bit more context. We started to add some colors in here. We know that right in the middle, you see that green 6. That's how many tickets were closed today. And how many should I be closing in relation to how many am I opening? That's when you start talking about deficit. It becomes a little bit more context driven and actionable.
Okay.
So like my first part of my journey, I go, okay, great, here's all this data. I don't know what to do with it. Great, I got some pretty dashboards. But I start peeling back the onion. We start finding out tickets. We start adding processes. Oh, well, why do we have all these tickets that are old? So we start solving the underlying data issues by building the processes that makes the data consistent. So I'll use the tickets over 300 days old, right? So if we go and find that there's a ticket over 300 days old, we go look at the question and go, or look at the ticket and say, why? Oh, well, it's because we're waiting on the client, to get back to us on something. You're like, when's the last time we checked on that? 100 days ago. Maybe we need to be a little bit more proactive with staying on top of the tickets. Why do we let a ticket go 3 months with no contact? Okay, so going forward, whenever a ticket goes waiting on client, we have a check-in every week. Okay, that's a process. That's an example of a process to stop the 300-day-old tickets so that you have something being done proactively. It's something consistent. I know that anytime I have a waiting on client ticket, there will be an action at least once a week. So now, anytime you see a waiting on client ticket, you have an expectation because there's a process around it. So then you can move into the maturity dashboard too, which is, okay, I know the data is decent. It's not great, but I know the data is decent because I've started to build a process. Now I've got context. I know the data is good. And there's a thought process shift that has to happen when you start down this maturity level 2, which is in dashboard 1, I looked at everything. You get information overload. You don't know what you're supposed to be looking at, right?
Yeah, let's go back to that real quick. This is I was looking at this whenever you sent in the information, and I was like, that's a lot of categories, and I would be completely. I already said squirrel 4 times, and that's a problem. And
Yeah.
and so I want to go to Ashley on this too for a second. When you work with our partners, Ashley, is this something that you help them to curate?
Yeah, I would say in the beginning, I mean, this is only one page, so this is pretty good. I typically will see several pages on a dashboard of information. Um, just to mention, this is all dummy data. By the way, we did take some of Eric's work and we recreated it with dummy data. So we're not actually looking at Eric's information. These are just nice little visuals, hopefully.
Well, you only close 6 tickets a day. So
You
you only
don't
close
have 660.
he only closes 6 tickets a day, and he has a lot of open tickets. I'm thinking, man,
Yeah.
Eric, we're gonna pop out your staff, man.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that real quick. But honestly, the conversation is the same. When I look at those dashboards that are really overwhelming, I kind of say, okay, it looks like you're just throwing a really broad net, and that's okay for right now. When you're on step 1, go ahead and throw that net as broad as you need. Think of all the things that you think are important, right? We hear, well, maybe I want this, or maybe I need to know this. Okay, put it up there. Let's see what that looks like. And I think over time, as you start to actually establish your KPIs, you'll start to see what's important, what's not important, what requires an actual process to be built out, what already has a pretty good process going for itself. And you'll start to kind of shift your mindset. From my perspective, some of the things that can be really helpful is, one, making sure you have the time to actually look at this data. So we'll often hear, okay, I built this dashboard. It took me 4 hours because I built 4 pages worth of dashboard. And then they never look at it. It's like, oh, I don't have time to look through all these metrics. I don't have the time for that. And it's like, well, you're never going to move past phase 1 until you set aside some time to go down those rabbit holes and to start picking out, where do we need to come into a change management process, or actually building a process altogether. So allowing yourself some time, putting it on your calendar, whatever you need to do to make sure that you can actually get that going for you. And then as you move into phase 2, kind of that I'm establishing my KPIs space, one thing that a lot of partners find really helpful is that manage by exception, right? So I know that in order to get good data, I always need to have an agreement on my ticket, for example. Well, build yourself a metric that says, show me all my tickets that don't have an agreement. And that's going to give you a nice little kind of cue, if you will, to say what happened in all of these cases, and where do we need to change our process in order to make sure that we always have that agreement on a ticket. Same deal with configurations on a ticket or what have you. Anything that you think is important, start building yourself some manage by exception gauges so you actually have a working queue. So maybe you don't need to go through all 668 tickets, but you have a nice little chunk there that you need to kind of look through.
So you gave a bunch of examples for possible data, right? And so again, to avoid from getting into this dashboard here, right? What's the preferred method from our perspective? And this is for you, Ashley, to talk to when you work with partners. Like sit down, talk, like you said, they'll show up with 20 different like pages, basically, or 60 pages, or God knows what. and you say, hey, let's start to refine this, right? So is there a process that you think to revisit? Like, is there a cadence set up for this? Like, we're going to sit down and talk about it now. We're going to see what makes sense. We're going to triage and remove things that are relevant, maybe, or just not as important, or prioritization. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely requires a group effort, meaning we need to work together on this. I mean, we can get you to the finish line, but you have to find the importance in it as well. So having that data-driven mentality is key, because if you don't put the value on it, you're not going to find the time for it. One of the things we do in our success team, something called, what we call success plans, but they're really like project management, where we say, okay, we want to help you mature your data and get to where you need to go. Can you meet with us, once a month? Can you take an hour out of your month every month to kind of set some goals, and let's track your progress? Why the accountability piece? If you know you're going to meet with me next week and you didn't actually go down that rabbit hole and start looking at some of those pieces, it's hopefully going to keep you on track, not get you to cancel your meeting with me, though that does happen. And that's kind of what I would say. Hold yourself accountable, or have someone to hold yourself accountable, and start setting the pieces in place for you to get to where you need to be. Right. So go down those rabbit holes, like he was mentioning. Find out what your baseline is, but you can't do that until you've gone down the rabbit holes. Right. So kind of this maturity process. You want to get good baselines. Once you get there, you can actually start setting some goals and some action items there, right? Because you know where you're at today. So it's definitely a process, and the success team works with partners. Sometimes we can do that in a quarter, right? Other times it's a little bit longer than that to kind of get those baselines together. Granted, this is all, as you mentioned earlier, persona based, right? So what a finance team is looking at is probably going to be different than what a service team is looking at. It's going to be different than the sales team. So the organization as a whole has to be willing to be data driven, because all of these pieces need to work together. It's not going to be, oh, the service team is doing really great in these areas, but then every time that they try to look at financial metrics that might tie back to their tickets, et cetera, it's a mess. It has to kind of come from the top and then trickle down.
Okay. So yeah, let's go to that too. Because my question right now, and Eric, you want to say something too, and I want to get to whatever you want to say. But first, I want to know, how long does it take you to resolve this? Like, what's the time frame? Obviously, if you're, and yes, there's a caveat of based off how active they are and how disciplined it is, right? You can lead a horse to water. I get that, but like, how long did it take you, Eric, to get to get this organized and to realize how to put together high quality data that you're going to be able to actually execute on?
Yeah. So I'll go back to something Ashley said, and it takes work, right? And what you're getting at is, how much work did it take? So you put in this dashboard, and you have to go to that 668 number, and you have to start asking a bunch of questions. And the time it takes can depend on how broken your process is, or lack of processes there is. For us, for the service side, it took us about 6 months to ask the questions, to understand why the data looked the way it did, to find the problems, and to put processes in place. And it's 6 months to dig for us. We were a fairly large organization when we started this journey, so we had a bunch of tickets, and we had a lot of things that needed improvement. And once it says, okay, well, if that's the problem, then here's how I want to do it. Well, if you're going to do that right, to build a process, you got to document the process. You have to architect it. You have to train the people. You have to make sure that the processes are being followed. So then you finally get high quality data, right? There's a journey of fixing the processes in the first place. And it took us probably a year before we actually had all the processes in place and the data was looking consistently like we wanted it. So we could actually start using high quality data to make our decisions.
Perfect.
And that
Now
was
I know there's been
one piece of our business, by the way. That was just service. Rinse and repeat in the other areas too. This is not a shortcut. There's no quick way to turn this around.
right. Which, okay, but you're the COO, right? So that's your job, is to be involved in all operations. So I'm assuming when Ashley wants to talk to the people involved and making this all happen in the beginning, it should be your level, or somebody that has your similar job that's connected to all departments.
Yeah. Ashley
And
mentioned it kind of start at the top.
Right. And you almost by default are the project manager for all, or whoever you assign, because you're operations, correct?
Absolutely.
So that's what every MSP should look at it that way. They should
in
be
our journey, we started with me in the middle going, I need data, but I had the backing of leadership to get this done, which then spawned up, right? So it didn't start at the top necessarily. I was the one that brought the idea to the table, got everybody to buy in. But then once it was an idea that we all agreed on, it was from the top down at that point. You don't have to be the COO to start this. You don't have to be the owner to start this. If you're a service manager and this stuff needs to be done, if for you to do your job effectively, you can bring the idea to the table and get buy-in to get it done. It doesn't have to start at the very top, but you have to have the top be the champions of this.
Right. Absolutely. I know there's a comment or two in the chat. I want to get up one right now. We're in the process of building out our ConnectWise stack, which is, I know Keith, he absolutely is. He migrated over to us last year, so he's literally doing it. I've not found the best resource for pre-built dashboards we can modify to our maturity and needs. Are these available somewhere? So, Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, each data source that you connect does have some pre-built dashboards, but I think the key to what you said there was your maturity level, right? A lot of those are kind of the beginner basics, and that's what they were intended for, to be honest. They were just for people who are, maybe they're 1 to 5 shop and they don't really have time to dive into that, and they just want some like plug and play kind of stuff. So those are probably pretty basic for you. Your open, your close tickets, that kind of stuff, your tickets by type. What I would say, we do have some really great examples on our dashboard templates page. And this is really just where we say, hey, here's what some other partners have done that we think is really great. Check out their work. So you can see who created the dashboard, what organization they're with. You may even know them because this community is smaller than you may think. And maybe finding something that's a bit more to your size or needs. Otherwise, I would recommend working with maybe your success manager and just talking about your needs. Can we get what your top 10 metrics are? What is it that you want to track? And maybe we build your own kind of dashboard. So not the out of the box stuff. Maybe you have to kind of start from scratch. Breakage is really simple to use, so it's not too difficult to actually build something out. If you're starting from scratch. I think you had another kind of point, and Sean, you may get to that, about wanting to go into like SOC and SIEM. There are, I would say there might be some limitations. I'm not really sure some of the SOC metrics, what we pull in. If you're using ConnectWise RMM, we can get into things like patching data, which I think is really important from a security standpoint. And you also have your configurations from PSA that you can use and customize. So if there are certain things that you're really trying to look at, I would recommend making sure that you have that data in your configurations, or of course in your RMM.
So yes, actually, I'm glad you covered that, because I was going to bring it up after I saw that. So now I won't now. But also the question about consulting too. Do we offer the questions about the consulting from our perspective for them to help them?
Yeah.
And we've kind of already talked about it. Obviously, we already talked about you're going to work with them because you're there for the success of the partner. But is there additional or anything they should expect or they should look for from us to get maybe more ingrained?
Yeah, I usually recommend starting with success, right? It's a great first step. There's no cost involved, so that's always a plus too. And let us have that conversation to see kind of where you are. If it's something that we can work through together over the course of the next quarter or even the next year, monthly kind of thing, then that would be the way to go. However, we do have consulting. So if you're looking for something that's a bit more robust, a bit more handheld, if you will, there are consulting services that's going to get more into your business processes and all of that fun stuff. And we do have professional services for BrightGauge. The distinction there, professional services, is really a do it for you. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I have to build something from scratch, I just want these 10 metrics. I already know I'm in a place where I have good data and good processes. I just want someone to build it for me, then the professional services team can help you with something like that.
Perfect. All right, so I want to dig into the dashboards more real quick here because I want to talk about the fact that there's 2 more dashboards we got to cover real quick here.
Yeah.
So starting from this was like day 1 for you, and you were exceptional according to Ashley because usually it's 1,000 other pages of stuff. So
Yeah.
obviously you're an overachiever, but you did it and thought like, okay, we acknowledge the fact that it's persona based. We acknowledge that this is a service delivery one. And then you said, okay, that's too much stuff. So I then dropped it down to this many things because the rest wasn't necessarily priority or maybe some just over information.
Yeah, and so like when you start down the second phase, which you can't really get to unless you dig into the data in the first one, then you're going
Mhm.
to start to say, well, I don't really care how many P3 tickets I have. Do I need to see that number? Because that number doesn't actually give me anything. So you have to start thinking about what is meaningful to you, and that answer is different for everyone. All right, so what's meaningful to you? And then you can start adding in operational maturity dashboard 3. This is where that mindset shifts to more of what Ashley was talking about, which is management by exception. So instead of seeing the number of P1, P2, P3, P4 tickets or various different things, you start thinking about what are the problems that I know. If I know a ticket should always have an agreement, I need to see when a ticket doesn't have an agreement.
Got
So
it.
let's take a look at operational maturity dashboard 3.
On it. Got it, man. And whoever's got the motorcycle going on sounds great. It's a vacuum probably for around kids. So, okay, Eric, I will cover for you as you mute yourself because you're going to handle whatever the lawnmower happening is. Me and Ashley will cover. I'm assuming it's you. So, what as we go down the pathway here, Ashley, and this will be another lead into what Keith had asked about consulting and working with you all and preset dashboards. Is there, based off of operational maturity, is there other dashboards for OML 1, 2, 3, 4, or is this something that's almost like impossible to do and you kind of have to curate based off of it?
Well, I don't ever want to use the word impossible, but
Well,
I don't. Today, we don't have dashboards based on where you are in your operational maturity journey or what level you're on. At least not for all. I know with Evolve there might be some exceptions there and different things that we're doing. But stay tuned because we're talking a lot about that and how we can kind of customize a little bit more to help people get good business management systems in place. So definitely stay tuned. That's high on our radar on how we can bring more value to our out of the box dashboards for partners, so they don't necessarily need to start from scratch. However, right now, starting from scratch is definitely not impossible because we have the guides, we have the samples, the templates, that kind of stuff. Yes, you have to build it from scratch. Yes, there's going to be a time investment, but we can cut down on that tremendously.
Yeah.
okay. And then there's there's a comment even asking about training videos for building out dashboards from Francine.
Hi, Francine. Sorry, this is my first live, and I love that I can see a photo. That's so cool. Okay.
You can, depending on who, where, what media it's coming from, and sometimes you don't. So that's not a guarantee. So
Well, it's fun when it's there. Yes, we do have some really great resources. I would say a starting place, our YouTube channel. We do have short, kind of 3 to 5 minute clips. How do I build a gauge? How do I do something, kind of simple? There's even some walkthroughs on some dashboards that we thought were really great and kind of just saying why we thought they were great and pointing out some of the pieces there. We do have a webinars page as well. So if you're looking for something that's a bit longer than the 3 to 5 minute video and you want to really have a nice deep dive, our webinars page is a great space. Not only do we have training webinars there that's going to show you how do I build gauges and metrics and dashboards and reports and goal lists and everything in between. But we also have what Eric has been involved in. We shared the link a little bit ago. Our user showcase series. Our user showcase series is where we are talking to partners. What have you built? Why have you built it? How has it helped? We talk to smaller partners, medium size, larger, so all over the scale there. And what we look for in those kind of presenters are either those that we've worked with for a while to get them to where they need to be right now based on their goals. Or when we met them, we were like, man, these are outstanding. We would love to feature them. So we've kind of already vetted it there. And you can just get like hundreds of examples by kind of scrolling through those videos. And then, of course, our templates page where we have featured dashboards where you'll have a build out key. It'll show you, here's what data set this was built off of. Here's what you would put as your measure, dimension, filters, etc. So it's actually going to tell you how to recreate some of that stuff in your own environment. I think little caveat there, everybody's different. So if I say partner A built this and they selected these statuses, you might say, oh, I don't have these statuses. That's fine. Just, what's going to work for you when you're rebuilding it. And of course, we're always here to guide you as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Eric, I want to get you, I want to cue you back in real quick here now that yard work is done there.
Yeah.
So as you went through the list, and I'm gonna go back again. Dashboard 1, a bunch of stuff. Dashboard 2, you start refining, right?
Yeah.
What's the difference between dashboard 2 and when you get into dashboard 3? Because to me, I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, I see a couple of different blocks and I still see some graphs and charts and yeah.
So when it comes to dashboard 3, you're in phase 2, which is trying to find the data you need to look at, and you whittle down the wealth of data into things that really make sense. Dashboard 3 starts looking at some of the problems that you found in your ticketing, in your systems, in your process, and now you're focusing on these are the things that I'm trying to fix. And so I've got eyes on the things that I know should be working with the new process. So you're kind of you're watching to make sure that what you expect is actually happening, and you're starting to do management by exception. You're only looking at the problems. Again, I don't want to know everything because that's not good. That's too much data and I can't do anything with it. This becomes a little bit more management by exception, a little bit more actionable. You're not all the way to the management by exception dashboard, but you're doing what Ashley talked about, which is get some of those management by exception dashboards, put them up there. So while you're working on the rest of the data and trying to understand it, you actually have a few things that you can take action on now to fix the problems, tickets without agreements or whatever.
Perfect. Okay.
Next evolution. And then we get to dashboard 4, which is mostly management by exception. Do I want to see how many P1 tickets? No. Because if you're focused on doing the operation side, if you're the service manager, you want to see where things are good, where things are bad. I'm at a ticket deficit. I need to catch up. If I'm in the middle of the day and I see that I've opened 20 more tickets than I've closed, I'm not expected to close it all by the end of the day. And if my goal is by the end of the day to have 0 tickets, I need to pull some resources. I need to do something different. You don't need to know that you have a certain number of tickets opened. That's not context. You need to know where you're at open versus closed.
So you're actually setting a threshold to triage and let you know the concerned area.
Right.
Because like you said, I don't need to know that 10 tickets came in today. I need to know if 10 tickets are past a certain time frame or 10 tickets need special attention because they've been flagged or whatever it may be. Is that correct? Okay.
Absolutely.
So
this is how you can take action. The idea is that every one of these has an action associated with it. Right? If you go back to dashboard 1, it's just a bunch of data. There's nothing to do with it. As you get more mature, as you find new processes to make the data high quality, as you start looking at the specific problems so that you can get it fixed, then you can achieve this dashboard 4 concept, which is the only things I'm looking at are going to be actionable. And this is day to day.
So dashboard 1 is Amazon shopping for Christmas for your family on day 1 when you don't know what you're getting them yet, right?
Nice.
Dashboard 2 is when you start to you talk to your spouse and they say, I think they want these things to kids. So you start to go down that path. Dashboard 3 is when you realize, okay, this is exactly what they want because there's and then whatever else you need. And dashboard 4 is when you're executing on it.
There you go.
See, I can relate to everything to shopping. I have daughters. It's easy.
Yeah.
Having 4 kids, you do a lot of shopping. So, okay.
So,
Is there any specific call outs on this that that people should know?
for me, one of the biggest things is knowing how many tickets didn't hit SLA.
Okay.
Because if my expectation is, hey, we're at 90% SLA compliance, how many tickets didn't hit SLA? Because then the action for me is go into that ticket and figure out why. Was it a process break? Were there some extenuating circumstances? We're not going to hit SLA 100% of the time.
Right.
But
And
when
that's
we
when you do
don't,
what, and then what you do the process, people, technology review of
yeah,
everything to make sure that the technology worked as it's supposed to automate if there's an automation piece or whatever it may be. The second one is the process doesn't process any sense, and then third, the person itself, and say that they do their due diligence.
yeah. So PAX 8 coaching, they call this inspect what you expect. And it's this whole thing like when you put a process in place, you have to make sure it's working. You want to keep eyes on it. You inspect, you watch what you expect. Right. And so that's something that I used long before that was integrated in. But it's getting to the point of looking at the things that, this doesn't look like it's supposed to, because then I can dig into it. I can find out what's wrong, do the inspection, like you said, and there's continuous improvement. I
Yep.
want to make my business better. So every time there's a problem, we want to analyze it, do a failure mode analysis, whatever mechanism you do to figure out what's the problem, how do I fix it, and how do I prevent it from happening again. Using a
Right.
dashboard like this shows you the problem so you can get to that constant improvement and maturity. So that's what the journey was like for us.
Awesome. And to Ashley, to you then on that, while they're going through this journey and their maturity levels going up, obviously, um, how are you working with the partners when you talk about these things when they start to refine? Are you then helping them to understand what they're looking at? Because even though dashboard one got taken care of and moved to 2 and 3 and 4, if I find it sometimes difficult to even understand why dashboard 4 exists for me in some cases, some categories.
Oh yeah, we're always checking for accuracy and also showing partners how they can check for accuracy. How can they make sure that their numbers are accurate? And just always kind of doing a little bit of a pulse check there. And another thing that we kind of talk about here, and this really speaks to the data organization part. As you start to mature like that, everyone's favorite, not favorite word, document, right? You should have some sort of documentation process set up on, what are the cliff notes here? What are you actually looking at? How did you filter this kind of data? There's things in BrightGauge to help you with that, but I've also seen documentation uh, softwares being used, ITIL methods, different things that you can do to make sure that your data is organized, and you also know how all of your metrics should be calculated and what exactly it is that you want to look into in each and every one of them. Just some of the small little things. I mean, if we're starting from basics here inside of BrightGauge, of course, using folders to help you with that, and descriptions. I find so many times that nobody really writes a description on their gauges, right? They just build it and that's it. But by putting a little description, you're able to say, this is what I filtered by. These are some notes on why, what have you. And then everyone in your organization can click the little details on that gauge and get the extra context. You can even do it in a text box on the gauge. So if there's certain things that you want everyone to remember all the time, put it in their face. Be be a little obnoxious with it, because that can be really really helpful as well. Um, Keith had a question related to smart
Yep.
TV. And just to touch on that quickly as well, that's another great way for becoming a bit more data driven, is just throwing it up on a TV, right? We do have rotating dashboards that you can set up. So you can say, well, these are the 4 different things that you're looking for, maybe 4 different dashboards that you're rotating through. I will say, though, if you are going to do that, try to make it fun for your team. You want to catch their eye. You want them to be involved. So make sure you have some fun kind of shout outs on there as well.
Awesome. Good. We have like 2 minutes left and we got to wrap this up. So I'm going to talk about what's next. And this is for all you, Ashley. This obviously, I'm going to go back to what's next first before I even jump on there. Go ahead, Ashley. What do you want to say for what's next? Anything anybody should know and look out for?
Yeah, yeah. I think right now the biggest piece, no surprise here, shocker, IT Nation Connect coming up around the corner. It is a great time to tune into the innovation that's going to be happening next year. If you're going to IT Nation Connect, we will have a Bright Gauge session. The Bright Gauge Success team will be there. There will be a partner success booth and also a Bright Gauge booth. So based on your needs, we're going to kind of be a little bit of everywhere. We'd love to meet you, so come hang out. But definitely listen to the keynotes around innovation. If you aren't going to IT Nation Connect, totally cool. We can also there's ways to tune in, whether it's virtually or getting recaps after the fact to learn about all the new things coming out in 2024.
Yeah.
And if they want, they can always just go in the QR code and get your information on it.
Yeah, or you could just scan this right here. This will link you up with one of the partner success managers on the Bright Gauge side. So if you aren't sure who you work with, or you just kind of want to talk a little bit more, whether it's what we talked about today or otherwise, feel free to reach out to us. We do sessions with any admin on your account. If you're not a Bright Gauge admin, just make sure you invite one along, because of course we can't talk about your data without their permission, but we would love to chat.
Perfect. Eric, you were about to say something too. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
I'll be at IT Nation Connect, and if any partners are interested in learning more about my journey or what we've had to talk about today, I'm completely open. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share what we've done. So,
or you can just join on the user group Slack right here. Look at that. I mean, that's such a great segue into that. There's a QR code for anybody who wants to talk to Eric. Don't contact on LinkedIn. Scan the actual QR code. Get involved in the Slack group, which is all users that are all helping each other with what these questions are today.
Yeah. And it's not specific to Texas. We have people all over the country in that just happens to be the user group that I facilitate, which is in Texas and the surrounding region.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that is all we have for today. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was good content. I think we could probably talk for like 2 more hours, unfortunately, literally. We could have dug into every single box and category and persona in the world, and that would have been, I don't know who would really want to watch that with us talking about the whole time. But yeah, thank you all for being part of this, and everybody's watching. Thank you for tuning in. There will be another episode next month with another facilitator or another user or partner that'll be on there with another colleague of mine. So again, thank you all. See you guys at IT Nation Connect. Ashley, you'll be there. Eric will be there. I'll be there. All the cool kids will be there. So just saying. But thanks, guys. We'll see you all soon. Doodles.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Bye.